The Growth of Primitive Civilization. Chapter 1. Is there anything else? I'm hungry. His long hair fluttered in the wind. He had a piece of animal skin wrapped around his waist, a stick in his left hand and a stone knife in his right hand. He saw an old cat in front of him, threw the stick and then the stone knife, hitting the old cat and making it bleed profusely. A bleak autumn wind blew by. Luo Chong, who was sitting at the entrance of the cave, felt sad when he saw the primitive people hunting in front of him. Don't ask why he was sad. If you were still naked in autumn, you would also be sad. It was really cold and the wind was so strong. So damn poor. I finally got to be reborn like the protagonist of a novel, but it's still the primitive age. I don't even have a set of clothes. Is this the legendary extreme luck? Is it the end of the good luck in the previous life? Luo Chong was roaring in his heart, but he was powerless to change the facts before him. Looking at the soles of his feet covered with calluses and nails filled with dirt, he could only accept his fate sadly. He really came to a strange primitive era and turned into a little primitive man who had been poisoned to death. Luo Chong was sitting naked on the basalt at the entrance of the cave, holding a stone knife half the size of his palm in his hand. Well, actually, it was a piece of stone he had just smashed. He was thinking about how to deal with the culprit that caused him to travel through time. The 2 bloody holes on his ankles bitten by poisonous snakes. Several pregnant women wrapped in animal skins stared at him strangely, and then they saw that the unfortunate child began to hurt himself. He actually used a stone to cut the wound caused by the snake bite. Black poisonous blood slowly flowed out, but Luo Chong did not feel any pain. Shit, it doesn't hurt anymore. This is going to be useless. I'm not going to die again just after traveling through time. Luo Chong quickly grabbed the leg and started rubbing it wildly. When he felt that he couldn't squeeze out much poisonous blood, he started sucking it with his mouth. Several friends who were also naked were stunned. This guy must have gone crazy before dying. Luo Chong ignored them. They couldn't understand the Mandarin he spoke anyway, so they couldn't help him much. He limped back to the cave, pulled out a red-hot branch from the fire, and poked the wound hard with the burning charcoal. Hissaw. After a miserable howl, Luo Chong, exhausted, lay on the ground, mumbling to himself that he could recover. Instructor, this is the first time I've been bitten by a venomous snake. You must be using high temperatures to kill the venom protein. Otherwise, I'll be dead. Luo Chong lay there naked, with a dazed look in his eyes, reminiscing about his days as a soldier. In his previous life, Luo Chong came from a martial arts family, learned martial arts when he was a child, and attended military school, so he was considered an elite in the army. He is proficient in wilderness survival, assassination, blasting, light and heavy weapons, and his mission success rate is just right. However, since the mission he took last week, Luo Chong has started to have bad luck, maybe because of some bad luck. The mission was taking place in the desert of northern Africa. He went to hunt down a spy. He had completed the mission, but on his way back he encountered a sandstorm and accidentally fell into a quicksand pit from which he never climbed out. Below the quicksand pit is a natural cave, which is very deep but has no exit. Luo Chong walked towards the depths of the cave with hope, hoping to see the sun again. In a cave with no signal, no light, no food and no water, Luo Chong walked for 5 days relying on a yellow drink he produced. The cave was getting hotter and hotter, and his hope was getting smaller and smaller. Just when Luo Chong felt that he could not hold on any longer, a bright beam of light in the cave gave him the motivation to keep going. As a result, when Luo Chong walked to the light source, he was completely dumbfounded. The hope that had just risen turned into despair in an instant. There was no exit at the light source. It was clearly a pool of boiling magma. He had unknowingly walked so deep underground. Luo Chong, with a face full of despair, no longer wanted to return to the ground. Even if he knew where the exit was, he didn't have the strength to walk out. With his current physical condition, it would be impossible for him to return the same way. Haha. Looking at the surrounding environment, Luo Chong laughed at himself. This is his fate. God has even prepared a tomb for him. But it's not bad either. Even if I die, I will have a place to rest. It's not like I will die without a burial place. Luo Chong comforted himself in this way, sat down leaning against the rock wall, and closed his eyes. The gastric acid in his stomach was churning endlessly, as if it was digesting itself. His hungry intestines were also cursing him constantly. Luo Chong, who was gradually in a semi-comatose state, was still being harassed by hunger. Even if he wanted to fall asleep forever, he couldn't fall asleep. An angry Luo Chong cursed in his heart. Africa is not a good place. It's unlucky even if you are not a chief. This time, I am completely unlucky. I thought it was over, but I didn't expect that when Luo Chong opened his eyes again, he would find himself in this haunted place. In a place surrounded by wild grass and bushes, a group of primitive people with naked upper bodies and only animal skins wrapped around their waists carried him back to the cave. Black blood was still oozing from the 2 bloody holes on his ankles, and a large snake with a smashed head was wrapped around his legs. The tribesmen thought that the child who was bitten by the snake would definitely not survive, but they did not expect that after a series of bloodletting and burning of the wound, which could be considered self-mutilation treatments, he stood up again the next day. The next morning, after a night of life-and-death torment, Luo Chong crawled up like a cockroach, took a piece of unknown meat the size of a goose egg, which was roasted dry, from a woman, and ate it up in ravenous mouthfuls. Luo Chong didn't care what it was now. He only knew that the feeling of starving to death in his previous life was too uncomfortable. The fear of hunger deeply affected his heart. Since the moment he joined the army, he had imagined countless ways of dying, but starving to death was the only one he had never imagined. It can be said that now he dares to stuff anything into his mouth as long as it won't kill him. The woman saw that Luo Chong was able to continue eating, and she smiled. She called the other women to take the animal skins and went out. But this time, someone couldn't sit still anymore. Luo Chong, who had just stuffed the barbecue into his mouth, hurriedly stopped the woman and anxiously gestured, saying, "Do you have any more food? I'm hungry." Just kidding. Although this new body of his is only that of a child of about 10 years old, he is still in the process of growing. In addition, Luo Chong has just experienced the tragedy of starving to death, so he now wishes his stomach would be kept at the point of being about to be full to death at all times. People often compare people who eat a lot and in a hurry to being reincarnated starving ghosts. To understand what a starving ghost reincarnation really is, just look at Luo Chong. Such a small amount of meat could not satisfy his stomach, or his desire to eat himself full. But the woman answered him, of course it was impossible. In this small tribe with a total population of only more than 50 people, the food available every day is limited. In addition, now is the season for storing food before winter. Let alone letting a child eat more, it is good enough that they don't reduce the amount of food. This piece of barbecue, as big as a goose egg, was given to him because he was injured. The other children did not receive this treatment. Luo Chong, who had just eaten half a meal, sat helplessly at the entrance of the cave, passively accepting the memories of another person in his head and thinking about his miserable situation. It is impossible to travel back in time now. Luo Chong himself wants to go back, but if he still returns to that lava cave, it would be better to be a primitive man here, which is also another way of living. But it is also not easy to survive here. In the memory of the original owner of this body, the winters here were very long. Humans hibernated in caves all winter, and they had to be frugal with the stored food. In the most difficult times, they only had one meal every 2 days. This way of eating certainly cannot fill people up, it can only keep them alive. Moreover, according to tribal custom, food will be provided first to adult males, then adult females, then children like himself, and finally the elderly and the disabled. But in such a harsh living environment, where would the elderly and the disabled come from? The sick and injured basically died immediately. So if there was really a food shortage in winter, he would be the first wave of people to be abandoned. As a result, it was common for several people to freeze to death or starve to death in the tribe every year. Thinking of this, Luo Chong didn't dare to sit there any longer. It was autumn now, and the weather was getting colder day by day. The adult primitive people were busy collecting fruits, hunting animals, and storing food for the winter. Luo Chong, a newcomer, naturally couldn't just sit there idle. So there will be no such thing as starving, and he will not be willing to be in the first wave of people to be abandoned.